Our last discussion was all about church hurt. It was a pretty meaty discussion, and we heard from you guys that you wanted more. You wanted more in-depth understanding.
Hi, I'm Reverend Sharon, or as they call me, Lil Sweet. Hi, I'm Reverend Drea, your spiritual chiropractor, because I'm all about alignment, getting you in the line.
Hey, I'm Reverend Jada, also known as Reverend Jada Hawk, because I zero.
Hi, I'm Reverend Terry. The ministers sometimes call me Reverend Black Belt, or sometimes.
And we are the Revs. And this is Truth Be Told.
Namaste all, and welcome to Truth Be Told. I'm Reverend Drea.
I'm Reverend Sharon.
I'm Reverend Terry.
I'm Reverend Jada.
And we are the Revs.
Yes, we are.
So thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Truth Be Told, the podcast where you get the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Nothing but the truth.
There you go. Thank you so much, Jada. Echoing that in there. All righty. So we have a wonderful discussion planned for you today. Our last discussion was all about church hurt. It was a pretty meaty discussion, and we heard from you guys that you wanted more. You wanted more in-depth understanding. So we've brought in two wonderful guests to help us really get to the heart of the matter. First, on my left, we have Dr. Brian Jones.
Good morning, and good day.
Yes, how are you?
I am awesome and fantastic.
Oh, that is wonderful, wonderful. And then to my right, I have Dr. Tony Lemaire Burks II.
Good day.
Good day. How are you?
As I always say, it's a beautiful day.
Oh, yes. Wonderful,
Beautiful
wonderful.
day in the neighborhood.
It is, it is. So we are talking again about church hurt, but we will be going into particular topics that we really didn't get to touch on or dive into like we wanted to. And that is sexual abuse and sexuality. But the first thing I want to do is go ahead and set the baseline definition for church hurt that we'll be working from today. And that is that it is the emotional, spiritual, and physical harm caused by a church to others, regardless of intent. This harm could result from a church's leadership or the actions of someone who self-identifies as a Christian. This harm could take the form of an in-person confrontation or an interaction on social media. So with that being said, I wanted to get from Dr. Brian what you think about that definition. Do you have anything to add or change about it?
There was a part in there about Christian, right? Was there
Who defines as a Christian?
as a Christian? I think that needs to be broadened because it's not just the Christian community. We know the Catholic community. I mean, still part, but many other different faiths, I believe, have church hurt. So when we also say church hurt, we sometimes limit ourselves about church, but I do understand the context of it. So I mean, it's a workable definition.
Okay.
And so I do agree with that, with that definition, but just those two parts.
Just that it could be any kind of spiritual tradition.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
spiritual community. Yeah, so just broadening that part would be very vital to the definition.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. How about you, Dr. Tony?
I mean, faith tradition hurt isn't as sexy as church hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think just always have the caveat of this is a broader thing, but I love the definition. It makes sense with, of course, that one caveat.
Okay.
So I agree with that. I think because we're here in the United States where everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but the predominant faith is that you're Christian, that comes up more. But yes, it can go across any kind of religious background or religious tradition.
Yeah, definitely. And not only in churches, but just like Living Truth 365, we're a spiritual center. We consider ourselves a spiritual center as opposed to a church. And there's a lot of different spiritual traditions have different names that they use for their body of worshipers. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. So what do you guys think about the psychological impact that faith hurt or church hurt can have on a spiritual community?
Go ahead.
well, so yesterday I was having a conversation with someone who asked a question about
church and about who he is as a human being. And the question that he ultimately was getting at was, does God love me? And I'm going down the road, right? But does God love me as a person who loves other men? And so I'm sitting there and you know, I could hear in him the pain that he's experiencing in his own faith community. And so I began to ask questions about that. And sure enough, that is, there's a deep-seated psychological impact that the kinds of things that people endure. So they show up at churches that say to them, you're not valued, and they're tithing consistently, and sometimes given their absolute last. There are some people who are showing up and they are serving on boards, committees, task force, work groups, ushers. You know, they sing in the choir, and again, they're hearing this negative language about who they are as a human being, and that they continue to go back. There's an element of that is they're almost as if he's drawn to the abuse because it's just what I know, it's what I'm comfortable with. And so that has ramifications on so many areas of a person's life. If they continue to go back to a place that is abusive, that's harmful, and because there's a part of your human spirit that says, I know this is wrong. I keep going back to it, but I know this is wrong. This is not going to benefit me in any way positive, but I keep going back. And so then you end up, I think, and this is where he was beating himself up for, one, questioning this, two, that he keeps going back to it, and three, he's beating himself up for what he considers himself to be as what's stupid. Like, I got to be stupid if I'm dealing with this. If I know all of this, why am I doing this? So broad psychological impacts.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Tony, why do you think that people in that position keep going back? Fear of what family members would say. You've been going to this church since you were a boy. What you going? Who been talking to you about this? Or this is how it is. Or this is the one that really cussed. Reverend so-and-so would never say that to you. It's like, girl, you weren't in the room when Reverend so-and-so said that.
Exactly.
And so there's this fear of what people will say, and then fear of what if the person who's saying these things, what if that person is right? What if God does not like me, who I'm configured, how I'm made up?
So basically, it's reflecting what they believe on a subconscious level in terms of their self-worth and the ability to love themselves.
Yeah, but everything is centered around trauma because, and what I use as the model, the pedagogy of the oppressed, that once you get in power or you have a church, because we know church splits and because they disagree over something, then they start their own church and then they oppress others. So people then form in that type of way, but it's systematic. So it would make sense that anybody who's oppressed, because I mean, even look at the statistics of people that are incarcerated. A lot of times or in the military, when they have 20 and 30 years of conditioning, they then have challenges being a civilian. Sometimes because they're also coming back with trauma. And then also anybody who's abused will then go back to a lot of times the abuser because of the condition. So I think on a spiritual sense, I think that we are taught certain things, what we call it in seminary is embedded theology. So embedded behavior, pathological. So we're going to go back to the oppression because we don't really know what wellness and healing and all that really is. So we have to continue to stay in those places in some sense that oppress us because it's really, that's all we know.
There's an element of comfort also.
Yeah.
I use fear,
about that.
but
Yeah,
I'm going to come
that's
back
good.
and also throw in comfort.
I get that.
Great resting place.
I get that, but sometimes you have the pastor right up in the pulpit talking to your face without naming you. And you mentioned about that they're giving their tithes. The church isn't giving those tithes back, you know, if they disagree with the person's lifestyle. But they're up in the pulpit talking about them in front of their faces and basically saying, you're not welcome here unless you toe the line. But yet many people still keep coming back.
Yeah. Well, it's a don't ask, don't tell situation too. I mean, because a lot of times people in the church know what's going on, or they know what people are doing. And there's also this duality of living. Okay, I'm going to be in the ministry. I'm going to play the keys. I'm going to sing in the choir, but yet I have another life that I have to keep hidden because that's not acceptable into the space that I'm in. So a lot of people use that as, okay, this is my life over here and this is my life over here. They never bring all of them into the room because it's not acceptable.
And what kind of impact does that have on a person?
Well, it is, I mean, that's a good question. What are we seeing in behavior? I mean, the suicidal ideation that comes along sometimes, people because it's stressful to not be yourself, your authentic self, and who God has created you to be. And when you're going counteractive to that, I do think then that produces definitely an identity crisis, but you flow in both parts. But what happens in the crisis is when both of those parts of you collide and they find out that you're secret, or they find out, or they have proof. Because I don't know what we did before we had technology. People got away with some things, but now things are on video. Suppose you have a video leak of your behaviors out, that are not becoming of the bishop.
So depression, suicide, an expansion of addictive behaviors, and you could run the whole list of things. Shopping can be an addictive behavior. Overspending, clutter, hoarding. I mean, just so many things that come from how do I wrestle and deal with that. But I'm gonna give an example though of a situation. If I were to call the name of this music superstar who heads a church, you all would be like, I know exactly. But this person from the pulpit called out a young lady in his church who was pregnant. Talked about her like a dog. Publicly at a service, at a regular Sunday service, worship service. Talked about she should be ashamed. Never once did he acknowledge this boy who participated, because it takes two to tango.
It sure does.
Last time I checked, it takes takes two to tango. And so, but here's the thing: that boy was a family member of the icon. Never called a person out. Now we're talking 20 years later. Child is flourishing, but the pain that this young lady went through at the hands and mouth of a person she held in high regard, and the community to this day holds in high regards. And again, if I were to call the name, you all be like, oh my goodness. And to hear the songs that this person sings, it's like, Daryl Coley talks about this idea of living the life that I sing about in my song. This person isn't doing that when it comes to that. And so they's perpetuating these harmful conditions to this very day, in my opinion, at that church. And I question every person I know who continues to go. It's like, why would you subject yourself to that? Because he's done it even, with his blood, because that child is his blood.
So I have a question about that, because you hear a lot of times that people stay in abusive situations because they're getting something out of it. Right? And in their eyes or in their minds, what they're getting out of it outweighs the hurt that they're experiencing.
Right. I've heard that said. It's not about the man, it's about the word. I've heard people express it that way.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good one.
I've heard about other kinds of situations in life where someone says, well, clearly it ain't hurting you enough to stop doing whatever or to leave whatever. So I would apply that concept to this. They're not in enough hurt to just pack up their bags and go. That could very well be one of the things at work.
Yeah, but I think a lot of times people don't realize they have options and choices. Because even when you look at spiritual communities, I mean, they think, okay, if I leave, where am I going?
Correct.
Because I'm going to go down the street and it's going to be another issue, in their minds. And, and so we really don't know what spiritual wellness and empowerment really is. We don't know. And it's fear, as Dr. Tony said a few minutes ago. It is fear because it's like, where do I go? I leave, but then, what spiritual community do I connect to?
Living True 365.
Yeah, well, hey, that's the place. That's a wonderful place to go.
So it's better the devil you know than you don't know?
For some people, that's their
Yeah.
attitude with this whole thing. Is like, well, yes, this happens to me at home with I'm going to use this example. Yes, this happens to me at home with my husband. This is a wife saying this, right? This happens to me at home. But, my children, I'm going to stay in this for my children. We live in a nice home. They go to a nice school because we're here. I get the things. And yeah, he does that, but he doesn't really mean it. I know it's hard. And but here's the real kicker. I'm married and my vows say all these things. So it depends on the church where you get those vows. And it's true. Like, obey is one of them. I factored that out of mine. I was like, no, cutting that line.
You're not obeying.
But obey is a huge thing. And then until death do we part. Those two contribute to people saying, I'm going to stick it out. I got to hang in there. I'm supposed to persevere. I'm supposed to just work with it. Or I have clearly done something in my life that warrants this, and I'm supposed to endure this treatment.
It's your burden to bear.
So we settle for the hurt.
It's my cross.
Or they're going to change.
Yeah.
That's why people stay in abuse, because they're like, oh, they're going to change anyway. We just believe in God that they're going to change, or the church, that's what people have. They, like, God put me in this, and it's theological. It's how you see God. And the value of yourself, because a lot of times we're not taught that. And so imagine someone sitting there and listening to this. The spiritual leader is not physically necessarily, I mean, some people in some cases, but the people I'm talking about are just hearing the word and hearing the abuse from the pulpit, but you're not physically hurting me. So a lot of times people don't even know what hurt is. They think, I just tune it out. I know churches that love the choir. They love most of the messages or some of the messages from the pastor. But every now and then a message comes up and they just kind of ignore it. They are numb to it. Oh, this is one of the Sundays. Something must have happened. He or she gonna say what they gonna say, and and then we get through it, and then we praise and sing again, and then we'll go home, and But we don't really understand what that's doing, as the question is, psychologically, spiritually, and mentally, and how that also governs how we look at ourselves, how we look at others, and how we look at God or the universe or spirit.
There are continual deposits and withdrawals in life, as I see, and I see the quote church hurt being the withdrawal, and there's a point when you've withdrawn and there's nothing left, and I think that's when the person feels like I need to cry out for help and support from someone. I need to go to a different place, or I need to just not go here. But in the minds of people, it's like, well, if I'm not at church, then I don't value, respect, love, honor God. And it takes a really powerful person to say that I can get God wherever I am. I can get God right now in this moment. I don't have to be in a physical. It is great to be in a space where you're gathered and collective.
Community.
Community is a powerful thing. We are meant to be in community. And if that community that you've connected to is harmful, you have to withdraw.
But then
find another community if it's the case.
But part of that was seen also in COVID, when people, when we were kind of figuring it out on how to connect spiritually, and then we, the internet and just different things. But you notice that first month, most churches hadn't had things, or spiritual centers hadn't had things set up the way that we have things set up now. We wasn't utilizing it, put it that way. And now, but guess what? People still found God in them and around them and as them, however you want to define it. And I think that was also a freeing period, in my opinion, that people began to see, okay, I'm not having a bad life because I'm not in church every Sunday. I'm not, and I'm hearing from God. And I mean, because I don't know about you all, and I'm not blaming the church, but I really heard from Spirit greater, in my opinion, that I wasn't just distracted.
That's the truth.
And I mean, and I could really sit with the Spirit and really, and not let it be filtered.
Yes, it forced people to tune inwards instead of relying on someone else to be their messenger, to recognize that they had that message and they could hear the message all around themselves.
And maybe that's the key to what we're talking about in spirituality, is that you are a spiritual being, a spiritual presence, and we have to go within. See that? And see, people don't want to go within. Because when you have to deal and when you have to take responsibility for your own spiritual development and not blame it. So maybe even this church hurt thing is still something we create. Because, and I'm not saying people don't get hurt, don't get me wrong. Because I can write a book about church hurt. Believe me, I've been in ministry since I was 12. And so I've seen all kinds of stuff. But then I had to realize, what responsibility do I have to work with my mind, my body, and my spirit to be whole and well and complete.
But also, what responsibility do you have to others and to the church and to the pastor to call them out?
Yeah.
Because that has to be done. You can't sit in silence. Yeah. At some point, you have to call them out.
And that leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask everybody about. We have been talking about this idea of faith hurt or church hurt from the person that's being hurt. Can we look at it now from the congregation that's watching the hurt happen?
You are at times in a space as a member of the congregation where you're deciding. You're deciding, do you want to be a bystander, just watch it happen? Or do you want to be an upstander and kind of disrupt that? And so speak truth to power to go and say to the person, hey, look, I know the role you play here, but what you did to sister so-and-so, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't.
Exactly.
And instead of going down to, well, she told me.
Exactly.
I watched this unfold. And I don't like it. That's a hard, in the minds of some people, that's a hard thing to do, but it's an important thing to do.
It is. And I can tell you, I witnessed someone in a hallway crying because of what their spiritual leader said to them. And so they went into the hallway and they were crying. And I walked by and I said, what's the matter? And they said, that person said so-and-so to them. Oh, really? When I was behind closed doors, I said, that doesn't sound nice to have someone come to me and say, this is why they're standing in a hallway, crying, real tears, boo-hooing. That's not a nice look. And anybody could walk by and see her crying and ask her like I did, what happened, and she puts it back on you. Wow, is that what you meant to do?
But part of this is this, and this may come out in a book eventually, is this narcissistic type personality. That is what you see in many of the spiritual centers, churches, religious institutions, with this sense of power.
Yes.
We don't really want to talk about that because even in the biblical text, it talks about if God said it, it kind of has more weight to it. You understand? So God said, don't do this. Thou shalt not.
Right.
And it kind of has a stronger weight. But this narcissistic type personality, and there are some narcissists, not just personalities, they are narcissists that are in spiritual communities, and they find themselves and they prey on congregations and people for that type of that adrenaline and that type of energy that they flow in. And I think this thing is so deep when you talk about church hurt that people don't even realize what they really in. They really don't. They have normalized it. And even myself over the years, I mean, you become normalized to this is the way it's supposed to be. They're the leaders and they can say whatever and do whatever. And, I'm supposed to follow them because even Rick Warren, I did call it a name, when he had the purpose-driven life. And he basically said, and now this is my interpretation, we're on, recording this, but this is my interpretation of what he said is that if you're not following in tune with your leader, you're not following God.
And I have a problem with that.
And
I have a real problem with that because God speaks to anybody that's willing to listen. So it's not the leader. It's not anybody that's standing in the pulpit talking. It can be a child. It can be anybody. So I don't have to listen to you any more than you have to listen to me. There's no more God in you than there is in me. And that's part of the problem in terms of that psychological impact is people don't recognize the leadership. My grandmother say, your mouth cut just like mine. So the leader's mouth is cut just like yours. They can lie. They can cheat. They can steal. They can murder just like anybody else. There's nothing special about them because they're in the pulpit. And that's where people don't recognize they have their own power to figure this out for themselves, not always listen to the leadership.
But the responsibility, people don't want the responsibility. Notice even in the biblical text again, they look to leadership to tell them what to do, how to do. Oh, they even said, in Israel, we need a king because this spirit, this God, this creator that's pouring down manna from heaven and all this type of stuff isn't good enough. So we need a physical being, a physical, that type of concept. We got to have somebody to tell us what to do because we don't know. And that's the part of the conditioning. But I do want to flip it a little bit too, because the ones that are empowered though, that have these spiritual centers and churches and things, they're hurting too. A lot of times, some of it is, I just don't think we're aware. Even I would speak for them because we call it in seminary bleeding on the congregation because they're hurt. So they get up and they bleed and just do what they can do, but I just think we don't really understand what we're really in and the impact. People don't really understand what, they think, oh, I'm just going to church. No, it's a different model. It's a different way of what you're taking in, because it's not personal, but it's principle. And people are taking in different things as they go. And it's our minds and our bodies, everything that we take in, if we let it sit, of course, it's going to produce something.
So I want to lift up two things. One that you triggered, and that is ultimately hurt people.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm going to leave that right there because I think that's a sermon in and of itself. The second is there is, in terms of leaders, when we're not careful, there is an expectation that we are supposed to always have the right answers, always be able to step into with solutions. Always, everything is supposed to align and supposed to come to us. And when a person is aware of true leadership, they realize that it's perfectly acceptable to be vulnerable. It's perfectly acceptable not have answers. It's perfectly acceptable to bring together a team of people to solve something. And then I want to go back to something else we were talking about. Here's what I think happens with people experiencing church hurt and why they over time become oblivious to it. You all are familiar with the story of taking the frog and putting it into a pot and then turning on the heat. And the frog just kind of stays there because things happen and the frog is just like, oh, this is just kind of this is the environment. But if you throw a frog into a boiling pot of water, it jumps right out because it realizes. I think people in church hurt situations sit in it because it's just kind of what they've gotten comfortable with, used to. There's a path I want to go down. There is we sing it, we recite it, and the passage ends up being, what is it? And lead us not into temptation. the phrase really ought to be, and leave us not in temptation, right?
Well, we know that
correct.
In the Aramaic translation that it says, leave us not in temptation.
Right. And so imagine though, take any other set of scripture. We've got a whole group of people who are wrestling through church hurt, who are looking at scriptures and don't have the ability right now to pause and go, wait a minute. What if I looked at this passage differently and I reframed that passage? What if I changed that? What if I talk with somebody about it? Because these are all the rules or the things that I supposedly can't do that I've been told I can't do. But if I read in the Bible, I don't actually see it. But I'm going to trust that these people over here telling me. At some point, I think it's really imperative to sit down and say, I've got to own this. Everybody said it in different ways today. I've got to own this around this hurt. I've got to own this around my experiences with this particular congregation and this particular pastor or minister, and do something differently. I have to do that. I can't count on anybody else to come in and fix this thing. I've got to take the lead on that.
Wow. Guys, I told you this was a special episode for us. We are so appreciating the input that we're getting from our two guests. So we are going to come back on the other side and get into some real deep stuff. If you think we were deep already, this ain't nothing yet. We'll be right back here on Truth Be Told.
Hi, I'm Reverend Sharon, or as they call me, Lil Sweet. Hi, I'm Reverend Drea, your spiritual chiropractor, because I'm all about alignment, getting you in the line.
Hey, I'm Reverend Jada, also known as Reverend Jada Hawk, because I zero.
Hi, I'm Reverend Terry. The ministers sometimes call me Reverend Black Belt, or sometimes.
And we are the Revs. And this is Truth Be Told.